you'll notice that my bar has very hard edges. This may cause me problems later on, so I'm going to go ahead and say Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and soften that edge up using a 3-pixel blur. We'll zoom back out. I'd also like this bar to gently fade out. To do that, we're going to use a layer mask. I can click on the layer mask icon here, which is at the bottom of the layers palette. You'll notice a mask has been added next to the thumbnail for the image. If I click on the thumbnail, I get a paintbrush. This means that I'm painting on the image. If I click on the mask, I get a mask icon. This means I'm masking the image. A mask, just like its name implies, hides parts of an image. This is a non-destructive way to erase or hide parts of an image. I'm going to do a gradual blend, so I pick my gradient tool again by pressing G. And I intend to use a default gradient, so I'll reset my gradients and use the default black to white gradient. I can now click and drag through. And you'll notice that the bar faded. In this case, the unintentional result was that the bar faded and got stronger to the right. That was in fact exactly opposite of what I wanted. I have two ways around this. I could press Command Z or Control Z on a PC for undo. And instead of dragging from left to right, I can now click and drag from right to left. And you'll see that the fade continues out. The other method would have been to click on the thumbnail and press Command I to invert the mask. Select the mask and press Command I to invert it. If you'd like to adjust how intense the mask is, simply press Command L to call up the levels adjustment on the mask. And you can move the midpoint, which affects the transparency, as well as the out point there. There's my black point and white point. And you'll see that my ramping effect adjusts accordingly. When satisfied, click OK. Right now we have a very simple and boring bar here. I'm going to go ahead and add some texture. I go back to my file browser and go back to the DVD that's shipped with this book. Let's view our thumbnails as medium thumbnails so we can see more information. I'll go up a level and I'm going to click on the folder called Gradient Layers, which is inside the Bonus Materials folder. Inside of AutoFX, I'll find some free gradient layers. And I can now browse and find a texture that I would like to use. Notice it starts to update the thumbnails and gives you a good idea of what you're working with. I'm going to go ahead and use this texture here, AF044. I select it and double click. This has a nice streaking effect. However, the lines are a little too thin for video usage. So let's go ahead and say Filter, Noise, Median, and adjust the pixel radius value there to soften the image a little. A value of 15 leaves me with a nice streaked image, but not the fine, thin lines that will cause me problems on a television monitor. I go ahead and click OK, and I could say Select All, and then Copy. Close this, don't save. I can close my file browser, and I can now paste that image in onto a new layer. The image is fairly large, so I can use the Move tool to move it around and adjust. The key to making this work is to take this layer and group it with the layer down below. I press Command G, and that creates a clipping mask, where this layer is only applied to the opaque layers down below. you'll notice that the texture has been applied. However, all of the color detail has been lost. We need to blend these two layers together. I can come over to the Layers palette, click where it says Normal, and select a new blending mode. I'm going to try Overlay in this case. You'll notice the results of the texture without, with. I could take my Move tool and move that texture around a little bit to refine the effect. If satisfied, I'm going to go ahead and link these layers together and choose Merge Linked, permanently joining them. I can now press the 8 key on my numeric keypad, and you'll notice that the bar lowers to 80% opacity. It's time to add some type. Double-click on my foreground swatch and set my RGB levels to 235. This is an off-white or video-safe white. Click OK. I can now take my text box. I can now take my text tool, click and drag to define the area where text will go. Once you've defined a text field, you can easily begin to add type. Just be sure to pick a font size that's reasonable, such as 48 points in this case. And I start to add my text. If I don't like this font, I can come up and pick others. Want to share a nice shortcut with you though. That's this. Park your cursor in the font field. And you can now use the up and down arrows to move through fonts. Press Command H on a Mac or Control H on a PC to hide the highlight. And now it's very easy to cycle through what fonts you have available. There's Papyrus, that's close. I have several options to scroll through. I like the look of this font, but I'm going to pick a heavier weight version. Many fonts also have a weight or style. In this case, I'll say bold. The font becomes easier to read now. I click Apply. Grab my Move tool and move this into place. However, I no longer have saved title guides. I can come back to the View menu and say, please show me guides. And if you use the Photoshop CS template, they'll come back. If you'd like your own permanent version, though, that's easier to see, try this. Make a new layer. Choose Select All. Then select Transform Selection. And you could specify that you would like that to be 80% of the original height and width. I can click Apply. And now on my new layer, I'm going to stroke this to give myself a definitive boundary. I load some red, nice high contrast color, and choose Edit Stroke. And I'll use a 4-pixel centered stroke in this case, and click OK. I now have a very clear overlay document, and I see that Wauwatosa is sticking out too far. Let's go ahead and lock this layer so it doesn't move out of place. Grab the Wauwatosa layer and adjust it to fall in the correct place.